Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us again on the 3P Champions. I'm Rob Stoller in Philadelphia.
I'm Greg Stern in Seattle.
Today's 3P champion, Mike Nilson, is an extraordinary guy who's experienced success in everything he does. And I think that's just the way he lives. He's committed to whatever he's doing until he becomes excellent at it, whether it's playing basketball or training or business. Greg, give us your thoughts on Mike.
Yeah, Mike is a great guy. I got lucky enough to meet him early in his career when he was at Gonzaga playing basketball. Got to see him from time to time and grow in the community. And it's like everything he does, he makes it work. He touches it and it turns to gold. I love his hunger for knowledge, his ability to process information, learn it, and teach it. And like I said, everything he does, whether it's his business or in his family, he just seems to know how to do it. And I love listening to him teach his lessons. He's so clear and concise.
Yeah, he really knows how to motivate and speaks beautifully. I think you will all really enjoy seeing Mike. Let's do it. I got some background on you, Mike, and you're like a serial positive guy, it seems to me.
I got a lot to be thankful for, that's for sure.
Well, that's a principle. What I know for sure is you walked on to Gonzaga and ultimately was Defensive Player of the Year. You've been successful in business. You've been successful in sports. Greg says you kind of attack everything you decide you want to do with a passion that's hard to duplicate. So this is obviously the 3P champions, and passion is something that we're attracted to, and purpose is something we believe helps people attain excellence, and principles are things to live by. And from everything I've heard and read, you typify those three characteristics. So how has your life utilized those characteristics of passion, purpose, and principle?
Well, I read a great book a while ago. It was called Principles, and it just really spoke to me because I love the idea of not focusing on the things that are fleeting, not focusing on the techniques or even the strategies, but those fundamental things that are tried and true and never changing. And as a strength conditioning coach, man, it's so confusing when you hop on social media and Instagram and you see endless exercises and endless talking heads talking about how this is the best device or this is the best strength program. And you can really get paralysis by analysis. And I have this awesome mentor named Gary Gray, and he talked about the importance of anchoring to principles. And if you really know your principles and you become a master at creating good strategies based on the principles, then you have endless techniques at your disposal. And so as a strength conditioning coach, he really taught us to anchor to things like gravity, ground reaction force, mass and momentum. The biggest thing he taught me was there's only 3 planes of motion on planet Earth. He really believes 3 is a timeless principle on the planet. The tripod is the most stable structure. If you take away one leg, it's no longer stable. If you add a 4th or a 5th leg, you're adding complexity without adding equal value. And so he said 3 is the simplest form of complexity. And he said it's everywhere on the planet. There's only 3 primary colors that make up every color we see. What we used in strength conditioning is there's only 3 planes of motion that make up every move that you do on the basketball court. You have the sagittal plane, which runs front to back.
I'm sorry, the sagittal?
The sagittal plane. Yes, and that's the plane that runs front to back. And so if you think about traditional strength conditioning exercises, I bench press front to back, I row, I curl, I shoulder press, I crunch, I lunge. Everything is predominantly in that sagittal plane. And as a physical therapist and strength coach, Gary Gray would say, you have to look at the other 2 planes. The frontal plane goes side to side. And the most powerful plane is the transverse plane, which is rotation. And so if you look at every joint in the body, if I look at my hip, if I look at my shoulder, if I look at my spine can move in the sagittal plane, it can move in the frontal plane, and it can move in the transverse plane. And so if every joint in the body moves in all 3 planes of motion, And every muscle that crosses that joint, that means that muscle has to move in all three planes of motion. And he said, now look at sports performance, the game of basketball. Of course, you need to move front to back, but the greatest basketball players are masters at moving in the frontal plane side to side and being able to rotate. You look at any sport, even something like baseball. I don't throw in the sagittal plane. I throw a combination of that transverse plane and frontal plane. And he said, so if you really want to be a great strength coach, you have to prepare your athletes to move in all three planes of motion. And he said, injuries. No one's ever sprained an ankle in the sagittal plane. You sprain your ankle in the frontal plane. No one's ever torn an ACL in the sagittal plane. You tear your ACL with rotation. And so he said, wow, if sports performance is happening in the frontal and transverse plane, and if injuries are happening in the frontal and transverse plane, as a strength conditioning coach, I need to anchor to that principle and make sure I'm preparing my athletes, not just their movement, but prepare their muscles, their tendons, their bones, create that stress over time. So then when they move in that frontal plane, they could be able to decelerate it and be able to get out of there safely. And so I love the 3P podcast because to me, everything in life that I really want to found, whether it's purpose or parenting or anything, you found it on timeless principles that are tried and true and never changing. And I think if your purpose is founded upon that, then the only logical thing is to live with passion. It's the only logical way to do it if you really are anchored in timeless principles. And so when you ask me about the 3Ps, I think, they're cornerstones. I really think it's that tripod. Without one of them, if you don't have principles, well, then your purpose and your passion is probably not going to be very stable. If you have a strong, if you're anchored to principles, but you don't know what your purpose is, you're probably not going to be able to utilize those principles. And so I love the idea of 3D.
Wow.
Well, I think Mike needs to take over our podcast.
I think
we
so,
got to start
too.
the podcast with Mike talking about that.
So first of all, I really love every word you just said. Just personally, it all resonates with me. But even more so because my son is a baseball coach and a strength and conditioning coach. Now I'm trying to get him to take that CSCS test. He took it once, didn't pass it because there was specific information he hadn't learned at school. He was a sports science, exercise science major when he played baseball. But he's a very successful coach right now at almost 26. He's got kids committing to D1 schools, and he's got some kids becoming high profile, and he really works out every aspect of them. And the thing I respect most about Jake is somehow he gets his kids who are high-level pitchers and players to work their asses off in the gym, pushing sleds, jumping up on boxes, doing all this stuff that you would almost think has nothing to do with baseball. I played baseball in college, and I never did any of it. If I wasn't throwing, catching, or hitting, I wasn't doing anything. But Jake's kids are committed to the work. And I already know I'm going to play that clip that you just provided us to him, just to hammer home your principles as somebody who's been there, done that, and I'm sure it will, number one, reinforce a lot of the things he may have forgotten or may just need reinforcement of. And I think it's also going to motivate him to take that test, get certified, because even though he's gaining respect as a baseball coach, I think having that the credibility as a strength and conditioning guy can only help him.
Well, I would say a couple of things. One is, from what you say, I think he's already doing a great job. If you're doing more than just training the body, that's another 3D principle. A lot of strength coaches only focus on the body, but if you forget about educating the athlete and why they're doing it and training not just their mind but also their spirit, I think that's when you reach people's full potential. So I think your son's already in the right track, and I would say, just keep taking that CSCS and study it. We have a lot of great strength coaches I work with, great strength coaches, that necessarily aren't great test takers, or maybe they're so good at their field, but they don't know how many inches the mirror has to be off the floor. Some of these, questions that you have to know to take the test don't necessarily dictate if you're a great strength coach. And the third thing I would say is, if he wants to be able to study the Michael Jordan of movement, and now it's Gary Gray. Now Gary wants to be called the John Stockton of movement because he says that's more style.
Who wouldn't?
You go to thegrayinstitute.com. He is, bar none, it's not even my opinion. To me, I think it's a truth. He is the greatest movement professional on the planet. I've done his 40-week fellowships multiple times. He has so many online courses and weekend certifications. And he really understands the power of 3D, because you go there thinking that you're going to learn about the body, and what you really do is learn about people's mind and spirit. And I think when you do that, you really can change lives. So I just want to encourage your son, because it sounds like he's doing great things and is already on a great path.
I think he is. Is Gray with an A or an E?
With an A. Yep,
Gray Institute.
The Gray Institute.
Hey, Mike, I always like to go back whenever I see somebody later and maybe they have good principles or they have success. I always want to know where their foundation come from. So I always go, well, I heard you on some podcasts talking about your parents in the past, but tell me where your principles came from. Did you have them as a kid? Was your parents guiding you in a certain way? Where did you get your principles?
Well, I'm definitely learning so much about life as I become a parent. And, today is my son Carter. He's found out he's a Gonzaga basketball player. And
I saw that.
Wow.
Today, and we had the best morning, just talking about what hoops was going to be like. And, he's so well prepared, but at the same time, there's so many things that are going to be way tougher than he ever expected. And so as a father and son, we just had this awesome morning. And I went from there, and I went out and traveled out and saw my dad in Coeur d'Alene, and we had lunch together.
Wow.
And I just got to give him so much gratitude. And I said, Dad, I always knew you loved me, but now I'm discovering just how much you love me. I just never knew. And then I think back of all the great principles that I'm really trying to practice and live by. And I thought I kind of had read them in books. So I thought I maybe saw them for, these high-profile people in the news, or authors or celebrities, people that I read about. And as I'm reading these stories, I realize, oh, actually my parents have lived these, and I didn't know. They were too close. I took it for granted. And so I would definitely say that I learned the principles from my parents. I'm rediscovering them over and over again. One of the things that I started 12 years ago, which has really been a huge impact on my life. I read an article about Jerry Seinfeld. And in this article, they asked him how he became the most successful comedian of our time. And he said, well, I believe it's this. He says he writes just one joke a day. And I'm like, wow, how simple is that, I was expecting him to say something really difficult, like I write 100 jokes a day. He just says just one. He makes a commitment. And then the magic is he puts his calendar on his wall. And every day he writes a joke, he earns the right to put an X on a calendar. So after a week, he has 7 X's in a row. He calls it a chain of success. And then as you read through the article, you just think about, man, after a month, he has a whole calendar blacked out with X's. After a year, he has 365 X's, or 365 jokes. And I just love the simplicity in that. And so I thought, man, I want to do that. What if I studied something every day, or did something every day for a year? Now, my life is a little more complicated than I kind of envisioned Jerry Seinfeld's, because as a comedian, it seems like that's pretty simple. Man, if you write one joke a day, you're going to have a great career. Well, my job as a strength conditioning coach, and as a business owner, and as a dad, and you have all of these roles you play. I thought, man, I couldn't find just one. But I said, what if I just studied one person a year? What if I found one area that I was really intrigued by, that you can't master in a day or a week, but what if you studied it every day? So I got myself a calendar 12 years ago, and I decided I really want to study the stock market. Who is the best person I could study? And I thought, well, Warren Buffett. He's one of the most famous investors of our time, one of the most successful investors of our time. And so I decided that's what I'm going to do. I'll study Warren Buffett every day for 15 minutes for the entire year. And I really like this idea that you set a goal for your best days, you set a commitment for your worst days. And so this is a commitment. This is not, I'm going to try and study. I have to. On my worst days, if I'm sick or tired or unmotivated, at least 15 minutes. Now, my goal might be to study for 2 or 3 hours a day. On my best days, I might study for 8 hours. I might be so excited about it. But on my worst day, I get 15 minutes. And it was amazing because after 7 days, I had my own chain of success. I had 7 X's in a row. After a month, my whole calendar was filled up. And it was amazing. After the year, not only had I read 16 books on Warren Buffett, I flew back to Omaha to see him speak at the annual shareholders meeting. I started, reading 10Ks. And by the end of the year, I felt really smart about investing. And then, but you spend a year studying numbers, and it just felt maybe a little too rigid, a little too linear for me. And so I thought, man, what if I did something more with the spirit? And so I've always been impressed with a guy named Thich Nhat Hanh. He's this Zen master who has spent his life learning about being present and helping other people be mindful. And so I spent a year studying him. And so to answer your question, that's when I really locked into principles and the way that he saw the world. One of the things I loved, he said, if I say something, don't believe me. He says, first, think through the principles, and does it make sense? Is this logical? Could you see this working out? And if you can, if it does make sense to you, still don't believe me until you put it into practice and you discover it in your own life. And so I spent a year studying him, reading his books. He's written over 60 books. And as I read all his, most of his books, I'm like, wow, this makes sense. And I said, but don't believe him yet. Put it into practice. And I just love that idea of, after a year of studying him, I couldn't find one thing that wasn't a timeless truth that I couldn't just anchor to. And a lot of them I just saw in my parents' life and my friends' life. You see them in nature, you see them everywhere. And so this has just been a fun journey. This year I'm studying a guy named Tony Robbins. And so when I do it, I just go all in. My son and I went to this 4-day event. It was 13 hours a day. It was called Unleash the Power Within. And not only did it change my life, it changed his life. And my wife and I were flying to Florida in December to do a 6-day event. And so it's kind of cool because I think, whether you like it or not, 2026 is going to come and go for everyone. And at the end of 2026, the cool thing I have is all of these memories that are really focused. I'm really learning about mastery right now. And last year I learned about global macroeconomics from Ray Dalio. And I just spent the whole year studying. And so it's kind of cool to, instead of, thinking about one memory, you think about a whole year as a theme. But yeah, I would say the cornerstone of everything has been my parents.
I can already say, Mike, you're one of the most inspiring and depressing guys I've ever met in my life. I mean, how can I even, I'm listening to you and saying, God, I'm not that committed to anything. Like,
oh, you
how
are.
can I even be a little bit like Mike? Be like Mike. That's my new principle. Be like Mike.
No, you're doing it. That's the cool thing is we're all committed to doing certain things. I think all you have to do is be intentional. And what's really fun is tonight we're going to have this annual tradition we do with my 3 kids and my wife. And my life has changed so much from the power of commitment. And if I think what's one thing I really want my kids to learn from me, my son's, he's leaving the house here pretty soon. I want him to know that you could do anything you want in life if you can make a commitment. You want to be a great husband? Make a commitment. You want to be a great guitarist? Anyone can play guitar. You have to be able to just make the commitment to pick it up. Now, I'm not saying everyone could be John Mayer. What I'm saying is you could be your best. And so we started this. This is our 4th summer with our kids. Is they get to pick anything they want. Anything they want. Wow. And they make a commitment for 5 minutes a day. Now, remember, their goal might be they want to practice for an hour or 2 hours. But during the summer, it's just 5 minutes. They put a calendar on their wall. So tonight will be the kickoff. We're all going to have dinner tonight. We get to choose the food. Everyone wants burgers. And then we'll sit down and we're going to share why we picked the thing. And so my daughter's going to play guitar for 5 minutes a day for the whole summer. My son Memphis is going to work on his jump shot 5 minutes a day for the whole summer. Carter really feels like he needs to up his mental game as he's going to be a walk-on. And so he's going to commit to listening to Tony Robbins and doing whatever exercises, mental exercises for 5 minutes a day. So we all have our thing. We're going to explain why it's important to us, really anchor to it, and then we each get to pick one little prize. And my youngest son loves basketball cards, so he's going to pick basketball cards. I'll probably get a watch. Who knows, with my daughter, she might want to get some makeup or some clothes. It doesn't matter what it is. And then we're just all hold each other accountable for the summer. And it's amazing. So many people underestimate what they can do over the course of a summer. And it's not just 5 minutes. So my daughter, she's going to do guitar. And, on her worst day, she'll do it for 5 minutes. But the hardest part about playing guitar is just walking over to the case, picking it up and putting it on your lap. That is the hardest part of learning how to play guitar. If you just commit to picking it up and setting it on your lap, I don't think, hope, or wish, I guarantee you'll be a good little guitar player by the end of the summer and a really good guitar player at the end of the year. Now, if you do that just for decades, you could do anything. And so it's been really fun because it's one thing for Dad to say that you can do anything. It's another thing to, this was a couple years ago. My son was in 5th grade. He wanted to learn how to play guitar. After a week, his fingers hurt. He felt uncoordinated, but it was just 5 minutes. Don't practice for an hour, just 5 minutes. Well, after a month, he can start strumming and he can get the different chords down. The highlight of my summer is we went out to my friend's lake cabin. We're all sitting around the fire and, he has to get his 5-minute commitment in. And I said, why don't you bring the guitar out and play for everyone? And everyone's like, you're in 5th grade and you can play guitar? And he gets on this little guitar and he starts strumming. They didn't know he was going to sing. And he learned how to
sing too? All right.
Yeah, the song Halo by Beyonce. He strums it and he says, I can see your halo, halo. He has this little high voice. And there wasn't a dry eye around the fire.
I'm getting goosebumps.
I want to live in your family.
So do I. Could you?
Can you be my dad?
No, the cool thing is, like I said, is we're all doing these things that we've committed to. Like, I love the idea of a goal is something that you want to do, and a commitment is something you have to do. And when you can change the really important things in your life, if you can change it from a goal to a commitment, if you can go from I want to I have to, your whole life changes. And so, Greg, today, you made the same commitment I did. I didn't say, well, it's a goal to be on the 3P podcast. You didn't say, hey, Mike, you want to be on the podcast? Yeah, I'll try and be on there at 10 o'clock on Monday. You said, no, it's a commitment. And not like, I have to interview Mike. Like, you're so excited. And you know that all these stories that you're going to share with the community are not just changing our lives, it's going to change their lives. And so it's that important. And so I just love that idea of we're already making commitments. All we have to do is just be a little more intentional and just say, yeah, you know what? It's not an hour. It's not 6 hours. It's not 8 hours. I can do 5 minutes every day for the summer. And then when you see the results, it's like there's no way you can ever turn back and not do it, And you see, the one summer my son did piano, and another summer it's flexibility and it's dribbling, and it's amazing. You can really change your life over the course of just a couple months with a 5-minute commitment.
Hey, Mike, I'll go back because your first podcast, Hoop Commitment, I loved it. I listened to it all the time, and my son, we were teaching him to dribble. And so we put the little calendar on the refrigerator, and so he would take 2 or 3 dribbles. I say 3 in a row, and then let's do 4, and he'd want to quit. And I said, okay, let's go next day. And then he'd do something, and he'd go, wow, that's more. By 3 weeks, he was doing 20 minutes on his own.
Isn't that amazing?
Because he got the confidence, but I was following your plan, the hoop commitment.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest mistakes, it's so easy to see in other people, yet I make it myself, is people want to get in shape. Okay, I haven't done anything for months or years, and I'm just tired of being tired and out of shape. And so, man, I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to go run 10 miles today. And you run so hard that you have blisters on your feet, and you're sore, you wake up the next day and you can't get out of bed, and you never get to have that chain of success. And I love the idea of starting way smaller than you think. 5 minutes, when people say, just, 5 minutes, does your 7th grader have a job for the summer? No. So he's going to have 16 hours to play video games, watch TV, swim, take naps, ride bikes, 16 hours, and you're only requiring him to do 5 minutes of work. And I said, well, that's on his worst day. On his best day, and he might go for 30 minutes or an hour. But the thing about playing guitar is, if you want to really ensure that you're not going to be a good guitar player, play guitar for 2 hours your first day, because you'll rub your fingers raw, they'll be bleeding, you won't be able to play again. And so what you do is instead just pick it up for 5 minutes or maybe 10 minutes and do it the next day. And pretty soon you build up those calluses. And the first time you can strum a chord, a couple in a row, and sing, boy, you just get him. And it just happened last night. Carter's he's got a big day today. He had to be at the gym at 7:45 this morning. He has 8 o'clock breakfast with the team. He hasn't met any of the team yet.
Wow.
I mean, he's a walk-on freshman at GU. He's nervous as all get out. It's 10 o'clock. We're saying, hey, buddy, you better go to bed. Okay. Well, my wife and I lay in bed, and next thing you know, we hear him in the music room playing a song and singing. And he just loves it. Once you can hear a song on the radio, a song that you love, and you're just in awe, like, how did they write this song? But now you can play and sing it, and then you tweak it, make it your own. And so it's been really fun to see these little commitments. That no one really wants to play guitar at the beginning because you're just not good at it, and you don't like to do stuff you're not good at. But if you can just keep them involved long enough to where they all of a sudden are good at it, and then now the sky's the limit.
Man, Mike, this is already one of the best podcasts I've ever been a part of. Your life lessons are remarkable, and the truth is, I'm examining myself as I'm listening to you. And my kids are grown, and they both quit piano. Like the older kid Jake is good at everything, so he was good at piano, but he never wanted to do it. The younger kid is kind of a math kid, and I sort of discovered that music and math have a lot in common, as far as I could tell. So I took Sammy to one of Jake's lessons, and Sammy's 3 years younger. The first day, he was playing music with both hands, reading music and playing with both hands. And the teacher said she'd never seen that in her life. Like, who is this kid? And I was like, I don't know. And I've had teachers tell me that Sammy is, a gifted kid and should really be. He just never wanted to do it. So Jake quit piano and Sammy quit piano. And I guess I didn't have it in me at that time, or I hadn't listened to you at that time to say, just do it for 5 minutes a day. That's all I ask, 5 minutes a day. And if I had, I can only imagine what he'd be doing now. Now, I'm not unhappy with what he's doing now, and I'm not unhappy with either of the boys, but yours is a fantastic sort of platform for getting good at something without suffering. My dad had told me he wanted me to run the Boston Marathon. I was in school in Boston, and he was kind of like, I'll give you anything you want. Do anything you want if you run the Boston Marathon. I'm like, cool. I'm thinking, I want a lot of things. So a friend of mine was running in the marathon. So I said, you mind if I tag along with you? So I did exactly what you said you shouldn't do. And I ran like 5 miles the first day. He was coming back from the bridge when I was still a mile from the bridge. And that was depressing. And I ended up, that was the last day I ever ran in my life because I was miserable. I was breathing, frost was coming out of my mouth, and I did everything you said you shouldn't do. And I've probably had that pattern. I'm thinking of things. I started writing a book. Now I want to write for 5 minutes a day. I can do that. It's not a big commitment. The only thing I think I've done right as a dad is stress the importance of principles. So I would almost let anything go with my kids. I wouldn't get really upset at anything they did unless it broke a principle that I believe they should observe. And at that point, they saw a different side of me. So they did grow up understanding that there are principles to live by in terms of behavior, how you treat people, how you treat yourself, your family, your friends, and all of that. And I'm pretty secure that they're sound in their personal behavior, which was always important to me. Even just saying please and thank you. They learned, first thing they ever learned was that. And, but your methodology and your philosophy are so simple and powerful, and you live it. So I defy anybody to listen to what we've already recorded and not be impacted by it. So I'm really impressed. I am.
Well, I would say I'm sure you did a lot of things right, just hearing you talk about how much you love your kids. So I think you're already on the right path. And I think going back to the principles is being a strength conditioning coach teaches you so much. And I love the idea of analogies because what seems so simple and self-evident in one area might be confusing in another area. And so, as someone came in and let's just say Carter's going to have his first day of weights today at Gonzaga, if they say, hey, the standard here at Gonzaga is you got to bench press 300 pounds, no good strength coach in their right mind would put 300 pounds in the bar and put an 18-year-old and say, lift it. That's what you're supposed to do. You say, no, there's a progression. And so what you want to do is find out how strong Carter is, and maybe he can bench 100 pounds. Well, if you put 300 pounds on the bar, you're going to crush him, you're going to hurt him, you're going to injure him. And so what you do is you say, let's start where you're at, 100 pounds. Let's go to 110, 120. And over time, you would build up. Physiologically, strength can only be put on so fast. Now, some people might have better genes, and they might be able to get there in a year. Other people might not ever get there. But there's not a doubt in my mind with the sound strength conditioning, nutrition, and rest principles that we can get Carter heading in the right direction. No physiologist, no strength conditioning coach, no kinesiologist, no one in the exercise science world would disagree with that. The idea of not putting 300 pounds on a bar and crushing an 18-year-old. But we'll do that with other things. I think about leadership. A lot of times people would take a kid that has grown up for 18 years in a home where they weren't taught how to say thank you. They weren't taught how to look you in the eye. They weren't taught all of these things that maybe we might take for granted. And now they're going to step on this college campus and the coach is going to say, be a good leader. Now, they haven't defined what a good leader is. They haven't defined leadership. And then they haven't taken a path. And so once again, I love the power of three. I think, well, if I really understand leadership, we should be able to break leadership down into its three key components. There has to be a path. And so this has been one of my most proud journeys that I've been on, is to be able to work for a staff at Gonzaga with the women's basketball team that realized that the players are not just a body. They were mind, body, and spirit. Let's love the player. Let's nurture the whole player. Let's coach the whole player. And they really think that leadership is the most important skill in sport. And I thought, man, that's a bold statement, to be a high-level basketball program. And it's not like we're thinking that leadership is the most important skill in sport and we can't win a game. I mean, you go to the Volcker Center, and it's a joke. We won the championship in 06, 07, 08, 09, 10, 11, 13, 14, 17, 18. I mean, it's like every single year is a banner. Yet, they're not focusing as much on the shoot, dribble, pass. Of course, that's important. But we realize that Gonzaga is not the best players that win games. It's the best teams. It's how those players work together. And what that takes is, it takes leadership. It takes the ability to be your best so you can help other people become their best. And so just the idea of be a good leader and think that all of a sudden you're going to have a good culture does not work. And so what Coach Lisa did, which I think is amazing, is she, along with myself, we developed an 18-week leadership program that progresses athletes through, that teaches what leadership is. In our program, leadership is influence. Every single player knows that. It's not this long paragraph. It's not this esoteric, weird thing. It's simple. You want to be a good leader, you have to be able to influence your teammates. The more influence you have, the better leader you are. And there's a path to influence. Level one is synergy. It's your ability to create relationships with other people, because people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So you could be the walk-on redshirt freshman. That's what I'm telling Carter. Be a leader tomorrow. How are you going to be a leader? You create synergy with your teammates. You look them in the eye. You have an attitude of gratitude. You have enthusiasm. If you do that, you're creating influence and you have an impact on the team. You don't have to be the star to create synergy with your team. Now, if you do that well, you're in the right to be a level 2 leader. We call it sweat or lead by example. The next step is not telling people what to do. The next step is showing up early and getting your prehab work in. It's competing on the conditioning. It's after practice getting your free throws in. It's doing your weights. It's nutrition. It's going to bed on time. Now, that's another form of leadership. And what's really cool is the walk-on redshirt freshman could be a really quality leader. They could be a level 1 leader because they have synergy with their teammates, and they can lead by example. But the only problem with leading by example is that if people aren't around to watch, it's not that impactful. What I mean by that is Carter thinks he might be leading by example because he got up at 4 a.m. and ran this morning and did his weights. Well, the person that needs to be led is still sleeping at 4 a.m. So that's why you need a higher form of leadership, which is we call it to serve, which is to tell your teammates what they need to hear with love. And the whole reason I told you all of this is because I think the biggest mistake I made as a young strength coach is I never had progression. I'd want to be like, hey, the athlete comes in, let's put the 300 pounds in the bar, let's go, that's our standard. And not realizing that we have to progress it. Or the mistake I'd make, I'd have an athlete came in that did not have great coaching, did not have great parenting, and I'm going to expect them to have a growth mindset, to be gritty, to have an attitude of gratitude, to be enthusiastic, without ever teaching them, without ever meeting where they're at and teaching them. This is what grateful people think. This is what they say, and this is what they do. And this is how we do it in our program. And we're not just going to tell you to do it, we're going to practice it. We would never have an athlete come in and say, okay, I'm going to write up crackdown. Here's our entry play. You got it? Okay, perfect. Now we'll never practice it again the rest of the season. I told you how to do it. Man, the way we practice our entry sets is we do it with no defense, 5-on-0. We walk through it. We talk the philosophy. Then we put dummy defense on. Let's just do a walkthrough and see what that feels. Now let's do it live. Now let's do it when they're denying the entry. Now let's do it when they're switching screens. We spend a whole season practicing the same play in all these different environments. Yet we tell someone, be grateful. And then we expect them to be awesome at it. We got to teach them how to be grateful when they get the brand new pair of shoes. And maybe it's not the style they wanted. We got to teach them how to be grateful after a hard workout, how to say thank you to a coach, how to be grateful for the person in the lunch line that serves you your food. Because once you can do that, then you can be grateful for the harder things. What about being grateful for the injury? Oh boy. What about being grateful for the loss and what it teaches you? And it's just too...
I'm sorry, grateful for the loss of what, Mike?
When you lose a game and what it teaches you. To me, that's like the equivalent of bench pressing 300 pounds. If you could be grateful for the injury, boy, that's high-level gratitude. And so I just love that idea of progression. And once again, that's just a principle. To me, it's not an opinion. It's just a self-evident truth. And there's some people that progress way faster, but most of us start at a similar spot. And most of us might not get to the Steph Curry level of shooting. But what I love is there's principles of shooting. And you would never tell a kid, hey, here's a basketball, don't just make the shot. I told you to make it. You'd say, hey, let's work on wrinkles in the wrist. Let's work on your feet as the base. And let's progress it. And if you're too harsh, that's just the physical component. If we don't touch on the spirit and the mindset part of it, boy, you could really make a kid hate basketball in one session.
Hey, Mike, I want to talk about that. All of that right there you said, because I love it. And I'm spouting this on the internet all the time because, me and you were both, we had to work a little harder than the average guy. I was a walk-on at Wazoo, small. But I tell people, it doesn't matter if you're making toast, you're tying your shoe, you're driving a car. There's a process to it, and there's fundamentals. And my biggest frustration now is that the sport that did everything in my life at the youth level is a joke. There's not a lot of teaching. There's not a lot of fundamentals. There are, but the process is so fast of playing games. Benching 300 pounds for a guy can look up the floor. He's dribbling. He's getting full court press his first game. He's like, screw this. My fingers are bleeding from the guitar. I'm quitting. It's the care's not there. It's about winning fundamentals. But I love what you're saying there because it doesn't matter what you're doing. There's always fundamentals to it. And there is a process, like you're saying, the system, and you can't cheat the process. You might get faster, you might get slower, but if you don't get it, eventually it's going to catch up with you. And in the youth sports field, I see it all around me as I go to these games and watch these kids, and I see these kids, I see them. There's Greg. He's not happy. He's not having fun. He doesn't have the skills. He's scared to death. They got him in, they're driving down the freeway when he's 15, so that I love because everything you said there makes so much sense, just the process of what you're saying. And I love that you do that at the college level. What can we do with the youth level? I know you're past that with your kids, but I'm watching this stuff, and I'm like, okay, if kids aren't in activities, whether it be basketball or whatever, and they're not learning it and not having fun, well, what are they doing? Well, they're probably on their dang phones, right? Mental stuff. So what do you see? I know we're going back a ways with the youth part, but you're around it. What do you see as in that area, especially in Spokane where there's so much basketball? Do you see a lot of teaching?
Well, I see a lot of people that are doing awesome things in the community, but it's kind of one-off. And I think, unfortunately, the momentum or the river or the society is moving in a certain direction that I think is really hard to turn around, and it's going to take a whole village. It's going to take a lot of us to do it. I think, my son's a seventh grader, I guess eighth grader now, and, going into the gyms and seeing the level of intensity that comes from the fans screaming at refs. I sat on the AAU board for a lot of years, and there's literally death threats happening that's happening in youth basketball. Yeah. And so what I'm really excited about is, I'm on the HYL, the Hooptown Youth League Committee, and it is not perfect, but what we've done is we've tried to recruit not just the best minds, but the best hearts in the city to be able to come together. And we don't have all the answers, but we know the answers of the only way you can play and the only way you can be good at basketball is if you developed early and you have a lot of money and you can afford and find a way to get on this exclusive team. And then you put together this all-star team that beats everyone else by 100. And so these kids that are on, that are losing by 100, well, they don't want to play anymore. Let's go find another sport where I could be successful. But what I think is less noticeable is that the kids that are winning by 100, I think, are harmed just as much. That idea of now they're going to walk in the gym, they've never hit adversity, they think they're way better than they are, and then when they do hit adversity later in life, I don't think they've been prepared. That 300 pounds is going to get them, going to hurt them versus be able to progress through it. And so I love the idea of going back and really making the schools and the neighborhoods the number one priority. Can we make basketball fun by doing it with all your friends that you're going to school with and the families, and eliminating the need to be able to drive across the whole city and transportation and the needs to be able to pay for expensive, trainers or gym costs or all of these things. I can't remember the number, but when I looked at what it cost to play AAU for a kid, this was years ago when my older son was playing, I think it was $600 a player. And you look and you're like, you got to buy a uniform and you got to pay the entry fee, and let alone if there's, rent a gym space. And I'm like, that's not feasible for a family that has multiple kids playing basketball, let alone if they're playing multiple sports. And so I think the system was really just broken. And what I love about the Hooptown Youth League is they say, yeah, let's team up with all the school districts so we can not only get free gyms, but they could be the gyms that are in the kids' neighborhood. And then that way they don't have to find a team. The team's going to be set by their high school. And so if you go to Moran Prairie or if you go to Chase Middle School, you're going to be playing with the kids you go to school with. And then all of a sudden it creates parity. And now you're going to have better teams or worse teams, and I think that's good. But you're not going to have now I'm recruiting. This literally happened after my son's third grade championship game. A coach came up to me and said, hey, let's kind of try and figure this out. I got a couple good kids. You have a couple good kids. And I'm like, in third grade, they're trying to form these super teams. And so I really love what Hooptown Youth League is doing. They don't have all the answers, but what I think they do really well is they talk to guys like you, Greg, to say, what are we missing? Do we have someone that's going to help on the skill development side, on the basic side, on the fundamental side? Do we have someone that's going to, can we get sponsors to help out with jersey costs? Can we make the tournaments local so kids don't have to travel to Seattle to get good competition? Can we find ways to bring outside competition over here? So I think it's so multifaceted, but I think the thing I've learned is one person or one organization can't do it at all. We got to have a whole community come together.
I like your mind, body, spirit at the youth level. I watch these guys, I watch their practices, and it's just like, all right, let's get going. We're into it, but there's no the building them up, setting expectation, having fun. It's just, and like you said, you're the recruiting kids. I had somebody from Spokane call me, a woman over there. She says, yeah, they're recruiting second graders and they're competing about it. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. But it is what it is. It does need to be changed because it's not sustainable. You said 600. I'll tell you what it's over here. If you go to EBC, you go to a Friends of Hoop, it's $2,000 to play. It's $150 to $200 for the uniform. I got to pay $20. My in-laws are in their 80s, got to pay $15. If they travel, I think we went to. I only traveled once because I said I'd never do it, but dang it, I gave in. It was about $3,000 per family because they had to get hotel, they get food, all that crap. And I'm watching the worst basketball. Mike, I'm over here watching this thing. And I go down to the end courts, and I'm talking to Miles Simon and Trevor Ariza, and it's 8th graders, and they're playing, and it's just, these kids are, incredible athletes, and it's just up and down, but but it's not real good basketball, but it's phenomenal athletes. I turn around and look at all the other courts, and there's probably 10 of them, 12 of them. Referees walking up the court. You can see a parent yelling every once in a while. Kids, it's just like, you got to be kidding me. What a scam. And so that's when we did the analytics on just this 10-family group. Like, how much is this costing? So for a 3.5 to 4 month season, we estimated the tournaments, paying for the parents to get in, everything for each parent. It was $120,000 for 10 families for 3.5 months. I'm like, well, if I rented Gonzaga and 5 courts from the warehouse, which is $50, $250, I could have this many people, have a lot of fun, really teach them in the moment. But well, no, we got kids traveling to Arizona. You can play down the street, but the money is unbelievable.
Yeah, that's was similar for us. That I was thinking, and it probably is more than $600, for just a kindergartner to play or a third grader. Yeah, when you go into the travel part, it is really expensive. And the whole time, my wife and I, we've done well and with our investments, but I'm looking around saying, how are people affording this? I mean, it is expensive. And so I just think, man, to be able to lower those barriers and to be able to allow all kids to be able to play and compete, I think is so important. So, yeah, the system's broken, but with that being said, I really feel like through the Hooptown Youth League, at least in Spokane, we're really making a difference.
I've been just knocked out by your whole area, Spokane, Seattle. The whole place is Hooptown USA, and you have, great people involved. And it occurs to me, Greg had told me that you and Matt Santangelo are friends, and I remember when we interviewed him, I had similar feelings to interviewing you in that he was so candid and so open with his feelings. If I'm not mistaken, he wept in the middle of our...
Yeah, man, he was telling his whole story.
So,
he was passionate. I loved it.
Emotional and real and passionate that I was floored by it. And I what's in the water out there? I'm not sure. Maybe Gonzaga's got some mojo going on, but there's such a healthy.
Look what they've done.
It's a healthy environment, and on the one hand, yeah, the system's broken and kids are, trying to win games at 7 when they should be trying to learn to dribble with their head up. So that's one part of it, is just the system. But the other thing that Greg and I are both kind of obsessed with is just coaching. That, coaches, and I've coached a lot, probably more so in baseball than basketball, but I've done both. And, I was big, somebody else we talked to agreed, I was big on like giving kids nicknames early, just to do something that was pure fun. Had nothing to do with baseball per se. But coaches, you talk about a kid who comes in who maybe did not have that great a foundation being raised and comes into the team with, some behavioral issues or self-esteem issues or whatever. You have to be in touch enough and astute enough to realize that, and realize that your position as coach isn't just X's and O's. You have to coach the whole kid. You have to take care of the kid. And I found out in a lot of cases it was kind of helping the parents too. And I've had parents ask me if I could talk to their kids about certain behavioral things. And initially I thought, like, why in the world would I? But, I felt capable. I had a secure enough upbringing, and so I would do it and kind of gladly do it, but it just reinforced my belief that coaches play a much more important role than we typically give them, because beginning of the year, somebody says, who wants to coach? And guys raise their hands. They just may not be qualified to be the whole package. And I think, we've talked about certification and different kinds of things, but, the coaching arena has to change somehow. Coaches have to be more prepared to coach a whole kid and not just a sport.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And I don't think that's putting down any parents to say that we want our coaches to be teaching life skills and building up their minds and spirits, because I do think I'm a good dad, and I think my wife is a phenomenal mom. But it takes a village, and it just happened. The reason why my son and I had that great conversation yesterday is he just got back from breakfast with his high school coach. His high school coach said, "Hey, I want to take you out. I know you're starting workouts tomorrow." And I said, "Hey, Carter, how was breakfast?" He said, "Dad, it was the best breakfast ever."
Wow.
And I thought, that's pretty powerful. He's had a lot of breakfasts in 18 years.
Yeah.
And what I realized is, as a dad, I think I was trying too much to prepare my son for how hard it's going to be. I didn't want him to show up thinking that, Coach Few's known him since he was a baby. Every one of those coaches has known Carter since he was born.
Yeah.
And I didn't want him to think, hey, Coach Few loves me. He's going to treat me kind. I'm like, no, boy, it is business, and they're going to be hard on you, and they're going to shake you. And as hard as you think practice was, and as energetic as you thought you were in high school practice, there's levels to this thing. And you're going to be homesick at times. And so I think I was preparing him so much that I maybe too much, almost made it feel like maybe he wasn't good enough, and maybe he didn't belong. I think subconsciously he's probably thinking, why is my dad preparing me so much? Does he not believe in me? And so when we had this talk yesterday, and he said, breakfast was the best breakfast ever. What made it so good? And he said, well, I think, Coach Carney just made me feel like I could do this. He said, there's been maybe 5 guys in the history of Gonzaga Prep that have started on back-to-back state championship games. It's Anton Watson, it's one other kid, and then myself and Rai Carney and Jackson. And he's like, just one of 5. And he's like, that's really special. And he's like, and Carter, you can play. He's like, man, you're the most coachable kid I've ever had. He just built him up. And so I think I was doing part of the job, which is preparing him to be tough, but I wasn't doing the other job of preparing him, which is, I believe in you, and you're there for a reason. And those coaches are lucky to have you. I mean, I tell you what, you're going to bring something that no one else has. And I think that part's probably more important. Going into your first day, I think it's probably better to be more inspired than to be scared. And I just thought, wow, isn't it so nice that we have these amazing coaches? And, that Brian, it would have been easy for Coach Carney to just be like, you know what, Carter's got it. He's got a good dad. I don't want to overstep my bounds. That's not my role. And instead, he cared enough to text my son and take him out to breakfast. And so I think about you, Rob, and what you're doing. It's a huge honor that a parent would say, hey, would you help my son out with this? Because they obviously see that in you. And I do think, man, even now, I still have these mentors. I'm just learning from people. And I had the best dad in the world, but you can't teach what you don't know. I'm one heck of a basketball skills coach for a kindergartner. I'm a really bad football coach. I don't know how to throw a football. I don't know how to do it. So
that's not true. I don't believe that for a second.
5 minutes a day, Mike. 5 minutes a day.
Well, you hit on the number one thing that Greg and we talk about a lot, but inevitably, I think it comes down to belief. And we always talk about who provided the belief, who gave you the belief, who told you you were good enough, who made you believe you can do this. And I think in virtually every situation, sometimes it's the dad, sometimes it's the mom, sometimes it's somebody from home, but oftentimes it's a coach who recognizes the intangibles. Greg actually was coached by Stockton when he was in 7th grade. And had you not, I would say, Greg, had you not ever met him, I don't know that your life would have had the same trajectory, certainly on the basketball court. But when a guy like Stockton says, I see it in you, you can do this, you may have to work harder, but you have what it takes, that is fuel for success.
I'll tell Mike that story real quick. So my buddy Derek, he became my friend in junior high. I knew about Grand Elementary and Sacagawea Junior High, and his mom was the assistant dean at Gonzaga, Sue White. I don't know if you know her.
Oh, yeah.
And he mentioned, well, we got to go to basketball camp, and they're big from Indiana originally, so they're big Hoosiers and always talking basketball. But I was really a baseball player. I was a really good baseball player, and I played basketball. But at that point, I thought, I was tiny. Small guys don't play basketball, right? So, but I ended up going to camp, and They picked the teams and all that stuff. And John was my coach, and he let me play on the high school team. And he asked me, I did pretty well, I competed and stuff, but I was telling him, I'm too small to play basketball. And he goes, what? He goes, I'm a little guy. You just got to do things differently, work harder. And and at that point, I'm like, oh, you can play if you're short, kind of thing. And then I started liking basketball more. So it kind of turned me a little bit, and I just kind of started playing basketball. But anyway, that was kind of where that little belief part came there.
Yeah, John's changed countless lives that he'll never know. Like he's amazing at being able to hold people accountable and hold them to a higher standard and make them believe that, boy, with hard work they can do it. And he's a special person.
Well, you guys play on Sundays. I remember playing over there a few times, and it was like two different crowds. If he wasn't in the gym yet, people were kind of shooting around, getting ready to go, and it was kind of a little more lax. John walks in the gym, he gets the broom, he's funny, he's all right, and everybody's shooting and going like, what the heck's going on? And he's just full speed. You're like, you can't sit around there. He's raising the expectation.
Yeah, the level of excellence he demands from himself and from everyone else around him is amazing. Even if that one day, and it doesn't happen very often, but there's days where maybe he doesn't win as much, and if the other team is beating him, but they're not playing as hard as they should, he'll ream them, because he just cares so much. I've never met anyone like him. I mean, he's amazing.
Yeah, that guy, he's got the 3 Ps embedded deeply.
No, for sure. Yeah, it's just a blessing not only for me to be there for the past 20 years, but now my son, he gets to play. And talk about a village. John will come up to me and say, hey, I noticed this with Carter. I don't want to overstep my bounds. I'm like, will you please tell him? Because if Dad tells him, it's one thing. If the greatest point guard in the history of basketball walks over and tells you, it carries a lot more weight. And yeah, like I said, he's served and helped way more people than anyone in the community would ever recognize, because he doesn't do it and put his name on things when he donates his time and his money. He just does it for the right reason.
Well, so do you, Mike. You may not say it, but so do you. You've helped everybody. Everybody you've worked with, your goal is to help them. You're not doing it to make yourself a better trainer. You're doing it to make them a better player, a better person, happier with themselves, more healthy overall. And same with Greg. There are some people who are just, for whatever reason, kind of selfless, who are happy to help other people improve, find success. And I think that's I guess it's a principle, it's a personal quality, but everybody who's worked with you over your past 20 years and your kids, you may not tell them everything and about everything, but kids learn from watching. And I know you've been an exemplary dad. And I think you're just an extraordinary guy who spends all his time trying to get better at everything he can possibly get better at, and to make other people get better at anything he can help them get better at. And that's the highest praise I can give anybody. And, right now I'm proud to know you. And I'm gonna try to listen to some of what you've said to do a little self-improvement of my own. Now, I'm not crying about myself. I think anybody that knows me knows I'll give you my unvarnished opinion about things. And I was raised by principled people, but I fall short in some areas in terms of commitment to something. Not my commitment to people or family or friends, but I could be doing more that would help me and maybe help other people. And hopefully you're the guy that gives me a little jump start to get back to it.
I love it. Well, we'll have to check back in here in 30 days and find out what your 5-minute commitment was and how you did on it.
Well, if I show up, it worked. And if you can't find me, I'm hiding.
Hey, before we take off, I just want to ask real quickly, Mike, just because I know that you started doing different work here in the last year, the NIL stuff. Tell us a little bit about that. You're still pretty much full-blown doing that, right?
Yeah, it's been fun. I retired from strength conditioning in Gonzaga a year ago, And now instead of coaching people on nutrition and strength conditioning, I get to teach them on finances. And so, one of my passions is being able to help families out. It's been so fun to be able to work with my siblings, and my dad was a really successful business person. And it's amazing how there are different skills. To build and grow and protect wealth is one skill, but then to be able to pass it down responsibly and share it is a whole another skill. And so I've really loved that. And then on the athletic side, this NIL era, you have these young athletes that are great. They're geniuses at basketball, but they don't have the life experience or the financial experience to be able to know how to be able to take that money and really set them up for life. The example, I just did a 3-part podcast series. It was called The Athlete's Guide to Building Wealth. And I made this 3-part series with full of stories and principles for every athlete to be able to listen to, because even if they have a financial advisor and a good accountant, you have to be your best financial advisor. You have to be able to understand things so, that these timeless principles of finances. And man, it's been really fun to be able to share that with all our athletes, because what's happening is these athletes will be maybe scared to trust people, and so they'll just keep this in their checking, or they'll trust the wrong people, they'll put it in the wrong investments. And the example I give is, if you just take $50,000 and out of whatever that NIL check, we know some of these guys and gals are getting millions of dollars, but if you're able to take 50 grand, and if it compounds at 7%, if you're 18 and it's 40 years until you retire, that turns over to equates to $1.1 million. And, I just met with an athlete a couple weeks ago who had really good NIL money. And, it's really easy to be kind of loose with it. Oh, yeah, I'll buy a lot of clothes, and yeah, I'll pay for plane tickets for my family members to come over. And next thing you know, they've lived a really fun life, but that opportunity to be able to set aside money for the future has all been spent. And so, that's really my passion now, is how do I really educate, inspire, be able to set up systems that are all based upon principles to help people take this life-changing money and set them up, not just themselves up, but future generations.
Yeah, I haven't been that efficient in my own management, so I may give that a listen. You're the second guy. Another 3P champion we interviewed named Dr. John Kelly, a preeminent orthopedic surgeon in Philly and just a remarkable guy. He talks a lot about compound interest when he counsels people, and so I'm going to check it out. I haven't been familiar with it, and I should be.
Yeah, the third episode launches tomorrow. Is anywhere you get podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. It's called The Compound Commitment, and they're about 20-minute episodes. And like I said, it's all based upon principles. The first episode is why you have to think like an investor. And this is what investors do. They pay themselves first, these timeless principles. And once you get that mindset down, then episode 2 is how Warren Buffett looks at stocks. He doesn't look at it as a stock. He looks at it as a part of a business. And so you kind of simply show how he evaluates stocks. And then episode 3 is on how Ray Dalio looks at risk and how you build a portfolio. And hopefully I made it simple enough to where an 18-year-old with no financial experience can understand it, and more importantly, be inspired to take action. I've been sending it to all my friends who have high school kids, hoping that the parents listen to it, because I think a lot of us as parents were scared to ask the question. Even if you have a really good job and make money, does not mean you're building wealth, because what we know, this lifestyle creep happens. When you made $50,000, you spent $50,000, and then you make 75 and 100 and 200. And at every level, it always seems like, man, if I just had 10 more grand a year at every level.
Yeah.
And so if we can find a way to be able to harness these principles at your current income level, and then as your income raises, we kind of show you how to be able to do it automated without ever thinking about it, how it can go into the right buckets. So anyhow, it's really a passion project. The nice thing is, even if I never made a cent off any of this, I just love doing it. I love learning it. I love helping people. I love applying it to my own life. And so I hope people get some benefit out of it.
Well, I'm going to have Jake listen to this and that. He's got a couple of kids. He's got 2 kids committed to Wake Forest. Awesome. 1 kid decommitted from Penn State. Had everybody looking for him. and he had this other kid who's a freshman at Wake. So he decided to commit to Wake, but he just did a workout in Georgia, and he had a whole bevy of MLB scouts down there, and one of the scouts said, "You're gonna have a decision to make because he performed well. You know, he's a senior in high school next coming year, and he was up over 96 and throwing for strikes and impressed everybody. And he's going to be one of those NIL kids." And, you know, the beautiful thing is, as soon as he got done with that workout and as soon as the coaches all left, he called Jake. He FaceTimed my kid, which I'm proud of the relationships he's developed. But I would imagine, you know, this kid, Trent, and his folks could probably use a little advice on the future.
Give me your number, Mike.
Compoundcommitment.com.
Compound Commitment.
By the way, I love your podcast. It's so educational, so informational. We should do a weekly call with Mike, I think.
You're a great
Can you do that,
teacher.
Mike?
You're a great
5
teacher.
minutes a week?
I love it. That's all it takes, 5 minutes.
Hey, Rob, Mike is definitely a 3P champion. Now we got the
Of the
Gonzaga
highest order, Greg.
contingency.
Of the highest order.
Of the highest order.
You're certainly, Mike, having an impact on so many people you'll probably never even meet. Everything you say is so sound, and you didn't get it all from a book, even though you seem to have read everything. You've kind of, you know, molded everything you've learned and read into a philosophy that is easy to digest. You've lived it. You were that kid that walked on and became a leader. I'm sure of that. Jake had a really nice career at school, but if he wasn't playing, he was still the first kid out of the dugout to congratulate a kid who just hit a dinger. He was always the one to get the ball, give it back to the ump. Everything that you don't notice unless you're looking, he was that kid. And he still talks to his kids about being a great teammate, about what that means, you know. And I don't think enough coaches do talk to kids about being a great teammate, not just being a great hitter or pitcher or shooter, but a great teammate. And I know that you cover that with everybody you talk to, and Greg does too. It's important. It's a principle.
I love that.
I really think today was extraordinary. You're a wealth of information and inspiration. Thank you so much for your time. I can't tell you how impressed I am.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, and thanks for all the good you guys are doing in all of our communities. This podcast is pretty cool because, yeah, it transcends just one little small town like a Spokane, and you know, you can reach so many people. So thanks for all the good work you guys are doing.
Thank you, Mike, man. I love you. That's great. I love listening to you. I think I still want to learn much. Do you do can I send my son over there to you for a little while? Maybe hang out with Carter and those guys?
On, let's go. Bring them over.
We'll be there for Hoopus. We'll check you out.
I love it. I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks so much. Really.
Thanks, Mike.
Well, we really hope you enjoyed meeting Mike Nilson as much as we enjoyed presenting him. I'm sure everyone's impressed by what he's done, what he's achieved, and the way in which he's done it. But I think what impresses me most about Mike is his fatherhood, the way he's raised his family, and the way he acts as a father and a husband. I told him, I think during the thing, that it's inspiring and depressing. He's a tough act to follow. Greg, what were your takeaways?
I love that conversation with Mike. You know, I like his attitude. You can tell he's got a work ethic and attitude that's second to none. Obviously, he was a good basketball player. He's a great businessman. And like you said, he's a phenomenal father. I just think everything about him is just uplifting and positive. And you can tell he really loves to teach. And, you know, I love teachers. Yeah,
he's got a lot of wisdom, and he presents it so easily in such bite-sized pieces. So he was an interviewer's dream. So thanks for joining us, everybody, and come back next time for the next 3P champion. Greg, as always, you rock.
Thanks, Rob. You're the man.
Bye, everybody.